Okay, this is so exciting because we are here celebrating Black History Month. And we know that Black history is something that has been minimized in American history books, or it's been whitewashed. But today we have a individual who is the living legacy of the eternal selves of Henrietta Lacks, his grandmother. And I'd like to introduce you to none other than Mr. Ron Lacks. Ron, how is it going?
Thank you, LaWanna, for having me. It's an honor to be here talking about my grandmother.
Yes, your Nana, right?
That's right. She's my Nana, but to the world, she's the greatest gift to humanity for her
Yes,
contributions to mankind. Yep,
yes,
exactly.
yes.
Amazing
Well,
cells.
yes, and for those of you that are wondering, well, who is Henrietta Lacks and what makes her so important? I want to encourage you to, after this, to Google
Mhm.
and to understand the amazing contributions and shifts that have happened medically because of the discovery of literally her immortal cells. These are cells that survived outside of the body and continue to live today. And we can just go on and on about the medical advancements, from even testing her cells in space to see how our astronauts would survive zero gravity, to IVF, cancer research, vaccines, including using her cells to navigate this pandemic world that we're in. So we are truly, the world is eternally grateful for just this, literally seeing our immortality around us, right?
Exactly. Polio, fetal fertilization, a host of other products that Henrietta Lax's cells have accomplished.
Yes. Well, Ron, what we want to do is I want to just tell the audience just a little bit about you, and then I want to dig into your book because you are also an author. You are a veteran of the U.S. Armed Services. You served in the Army. You are a serial entrepreneur. You come from a family of entrepreneurs where you've run the family store, the family meat market, real estate acquisition. You've just done a lot in your life, but right now you are on a mission to help the world understand the rest of the story, right?
Right, right. You
So
know,
tell us a little bit about your book and what motivated you to say, I've gotta let the world know that there's a other side to this story.
exactly. I mean, as important as healer cells are, they had to know about the person behind the healer cells, and that's my grandmother Henrietta Lacks. They tried to portray her as a poor black farmer, which was so far from the truth. Anyone that look at that iconic picture of her and my grandfather dressed to the T, I don't see how they come away with that. But my grandmother wanted better for her children. That's why they migrated to Baltimore, Maryland. And I'm enjoying the fruits of her labor because she did get her children educated and for them to be more prosperous in life. And that's what I'm enjoying right to this day from the stores that we used to have. You know, my dad, he's definitely an entrepreneur, and his mother brought that out in him that he wanted better for his family, and through that, I want the same thing for my grandchildren. So I wanted the story to be told correctly, so my family can hold their heads up high, knowing that Henrietta wasn't illiterate. She didn't sign her name with the X the way they tried to portray her in the books.
Oh, that's huge. And I know some individuals may think, okay, Ron, let's really focus on the bigger picture. But to those that are listening, I want you to really lean into this conversation. We understand, and we are not minimizing at all. I mean, humankind is still here and advancing because of Henrietta Lacks, Ron's grandmother,
Correct.
Ron's nana. But when we just diminish her to this cell in a petri dish, we miss the genius, the divine imprint that is now living in each of us every day. Believe it or not, if you ain't got any kind of vaccine, say thank you, Henrietta. If you have a child,
yes,
because you were unable to bear naturally and through in vitro fertilization, like my niece and nephew, thank you, Henrietta. So we want you to understand the woman who, because of that sacrifice, unfortunate, she died of cervical cancer. And but it's really important that you hear this story. And I want to read something from your book. And you said something really powerful. And for us as a people, it does become very frustrating when our story is whitewashed or our story is minimized. And like you said, my grandmother wasn't this poor, illiterate woman who signed with an X. I want to read how you described her. You said that you were talking about, there was another book, and I'm going to just leave that book unnamed, was written about your grandmother. And it said, the author judged your family based on her history and experiences as a white woman in America, not based on the history and experiences of a Black family only a couple of generations out of slavery. My grandparents may not have been wealthy, but they did everything they could to provide for their family. And, Ron, that is so common, unfortunately, that the media, the white experience wants to paint us in a certain way, always less than, instead of saying, okay, look at the time, right? I think your grandmother went to the 6th grade, which was at that time considered a point of completion. So again, remember the educational system was a little different, right? And I love, like in your book, you have her signature showing, okay, she signed this in cursive. This is not someone that just said, hand me a pencil and I make an X.
Exactly.
And I want to share just something with me that just happened recently. So when I read that part of your story, it resonated with me. My father's 91, has an advanced degree, just like you, served in the military. Well, he became ill over right after Christmas, over the New Year's holiday. And we took him to the hospital. Everything turned out fine. And he came back, and you know how they give you the discharge papers. I'm looking through, and all of a sudden it shows where he was supposed to sign, and there was an X. And I said, Dad, what is that? And he said, the guy just told me just put an X. Ron, I know people would say, LaWanna, what's the big deal? Your dad was sick. My dad was sick. He wasn't dead. My father could still sign his name. I was livid. I said, Dad, don't you ever have anyone take your name from you.
Exactly.
Right? Exactly. And that's what you do. When you put an X, you're stripping symbolically the identity of that person.
Exactly.
And I want you to talk about that, because that's what happened with her sales.
Yes.
Instead of labeling them Henrietta Lacks.
Exactly.
I mean, the Gila, right?
Right. I mean, to minimize what this Black woman sells accomplished. I mean, it has helped so many people being saved from polio, from being born with fetal fertilization. I mean, it just does history no justice, not picking up all the pieces and putting them in the right places to who this person was. I mean, that just goes to show Black people have to tell their story the correct way, because they always try to minimize what Black folks have done in this world. And it needs to stop, because we all are one people on this earth, and everybody is benefiting from healer cells should know who she was.
Yes, I totally agree. And I want to go back a little bit and give a little bit more humanity to your grandmother. So again, she was depicted as, poor, uneducated, farmer. And this is not knocking anyone who was a farmer. My grandfather was a farmer. That's not it.
Right.
But let's talk about the story. You said that she lived in one of the largest African-American communities in Baltimore County. Keep in mind, people, we're talking a little bit about Black history. We know some of the great thriving Black communities that were out there, and many, we think about what happened with Black Wall Street, were unfortunately destroyed. So Black Wall Street isn't the only one that was destroyed, but Blacks did have a sense of community, a sense of commerce. And you said she was part of the largest African-American community in Baltimore counties. A lot of Black men found jobs with Bethlehem Steel, making decent money. And you said that your grandparents found a small area in Turner Station and created a community for themselves. It wasn't some dilapidated area of poor, uneducated Blacks. It was a thriving community of businesses and families with schools, churches, grocery stores, beauty shops. Doctors opened offices in this area, restaurants, dentists, gas stations, liquor store, and clothing stores sprang up and prospered around Turner Station. Yes, and I want to sit there for a moment, because the world seems to think that we can't, as a community, come together and create our own commerce and create our own sense of economic advancement. But your grandmother grew up in that era, and then you guys became a family of entrepreneurs. You want to talk a little bit about that?
I mean, it's the same old playbook. Whenever we get ahead, they knock us back 2 steps. Every time that Black folks get ahead of the curve the way we're supposed to be, something always knocks Black folks back on their heels. It do, just like you said, Black Wall Street, even with the Black Panthers, they wanted the police brutality to stop. I mean, they was just protesting, but for the Black neighborhoods to stop that brutality, it just goes back to Tuskegee when they experimented on Black folks. I mean, we are the most underdog people in the world, that comes back and make it when we gather as a group. We do.
Yeah, as a people, we've gone through, and we still are we're a faith-based people.
We lose a lot of our leaders along the way. That's what happened. We lose a lot of our leaders that help guide the way. We
do, but I'm going to challenge you a little bit, Ron, because I want to say, within our communities, like you now are rising up. Mm-hmm. A leader is someone that is willing to amplify that voice and spotlight the truth, correct, or right the wrong or injustice. So I see you as one of the leaders, one of the people that are saying, look, folks, we need to not only recognize the story,
I stand corrected,
but how many people, even today, think about it, people, any of you who've had any sort of biopsies and things done, have you ever asked, what are you doing with that after you determine if it's cancerous or not? Have you ever asked? Mm-hmm. How do you discard it? Did you discard it? Mm-hmm. Because what happened to your grandmother is still happening today.
Right. Well, because of Henrietta, they came up with a consent form now that you have to sign.
But most people think about it when you're going into your entry form, and it's all this. It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
And it's in medical terms. And will most people understand?
Right. And you're sick anyway. You say, come on, just make me and sign that thing. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, because I was just home in Arizona, and my mom had to have a outpatient procedure. And I was there with her, and my mother's 85, and they handed her a tablet. And she looks at it, she goes, it's the stylus, not a pen. She goes, what am I supposed to do with that? And so I'm now having to navigate her to help her to fill it out. And I thought, wow, here is a senior, and you just handed her this, but you didn't help acclimate her to this new device.
Right.
And then all of the questions, she was like, well, what does this mean? What are they saying? What does this dye mean? Because they were doing a contrast, and I had to explain to her, there's certain risk. But I really think it's important, and I'm speaking to us as a community. to individuals where English is not your primary language, or anyone that's listening around the world, have an advocate for
Yeah.
your youth, for your seniors, even for yourself, to help
Right.
you understand medically what's going on, because you've got to be part of the team, right, Ron?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to read this. And you mentioned that there were a lot of conspiracy theories. At that time, John Hopkins was the only, I think, one of two hospitals that took African Americans in. And as you said, that there's been, a lot of, Tuskegee was an atrocity. That was an outright experimentation, and we know that that's happened not just in our people. We look at the Jewish race. I mean, you can go back generations upon
Exactly.
generations
Yes.
where we've had this. But one of the things that's unfortunate, and again, I'm going back to the whitewashing. I had heard of HeLa cells, but Ron, until I honestly heard about the other book and saw the movie, I had no idea they belonged to a Black woman.
Really? Wow. Yeah.
I never did. I mean,
You know, they used to call her Helen Lawson and Helen Lane to try to make her sound more white. Back there in the 50s, because it came from a Black person, and they wanted people to take the polio vaccine.
oh yeah, I totally get that, because can you imagine if they had said the source?
Yeah, exactly.
It was, oh no,
Right.
no, I'll take my
Right.
chances.
But you hope they wouldn't have chose to die from it. But I mean, sometimes racism runs so deep that, I mean, it might have. I mean, he was
Right.
life-saving, and this came from a Black woman. Which one would you choose? I mean,
Now I know you've got you have your book. At the end of the day, for those that are reading, what key message do you want people to walk away from?
basically, tell your own story. I mean, I told my story because I seen my dad and my grandfather, what it did to them over the years, trying to find out what was going on with my with Henrietta. So the last straw was me when they was on Good Morning News with Oprah and Gayle King, Charlie Rowe, and called my aunt crazy. And nobody would ever call my aunt that, but the woman that wrote the first book. So I said, no, I can't have history betray my family that way. So I mean, a lot of powerful people try to block me and stop me from telling my side of the story, but me and my wife, we prevailed and we kept going forward because this was so important to my family, but not only that, to the Black race. You know, that this amazing woman has done so much for the world. And I mean the world. Her cell's been used all over the world.
Right, right. She died in, was it 1953?
51.
51. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so look at 70 plus years. We continue to find medical advancements, and this will, like I think you had mentioned before, when we're gone.
Yes. No
your grandmother literally is still living.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, think about it. I mean, literally, her full composite DNA is still existing.
Exactly. Today. That's huge. That's really huge.
It's huge. It's huge. It's like, I mean, when I just sit, sometimes I'm just like, whoa. You can't even wrap your hands around it.
So imagine what her cells might be able to accomplish 100 years from now. So they said, oh man, these are some amazing cells. I couldn't let that one book stand to tell my family story. And I hope I did a great job of presenting presenting my family, the Lacks family. That's why I added so many photos so people can gather for themselves and look at this family. And
Yes.
that has a powerful impact along with the words that I put on the page. Yes.
The one thing that I want to add, and this is the last question, is so we know the world has benefited. We know the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the deep pockets have benefited. Um, but and then this is a sort of an ethical thing, but then we know financially your family has not. Um, Many contributions that have been made, innovations, research that Blacks have done, we've not benefited from it. And that's kind of a controversial statement, but I really want to get your take on what do you and the family feel? Obviously, you're proud of what has been able to happen because of your grandmother, but unfortunately, it was a tragedy that gave this world a gift, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your family lost a grandmother.
Right.
The world received hope. But on the other side, billions and billions and billions of dollars have been made.
Right.
How much of that has your family made? And if you don't want to answer that, I'm totally fine.
Nothing. We haven't received anything. I mean, imagine that, they took my pieces of my grandmother's body without her permission or her consent or knowledge. Uh, and companies have benefited to the tune of billions of dollars. Thermo Fisher just made 30 billion alone last year on herself. So my father, mother, grandfather, we all needed. They needed medical assistance in life. I mean, it wasn't adequate enough for what Henrietta has did for the world. So I'm quite sure that she's looking down. Well, what are y'all doing for my family? Like my mother passed away not too long ago, January 7th. I called John Hopkins and said, "Look, I would like to bring my mother down. Something's not right," and they wouldn't accept her. 2 days later, she passed away. I mean, they couldn't even bring my mother and see her because I told them she's not breathing properly. And Dr. Ford, who was supposed to be the liaison for the Lacks family, told me I should call Walgreens and see if I get something that monitor the oxygen levels in her in her breathing. It was disgraceful, but 2 days later she passed away. I figured that at least they could have brought my mother in and see what they could have done for her. Those
Yeah.
are the little things that they could have done to help the Lacks family. John Hopkins said they haven't benefited, but they utilize her name, and believe me, because of her name, they have elevated their self behind Henrietta Lacks
Right.
on their accomplishments.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you come back and talk and do another conversation and talk about the
This is
economics of the matter, because
this
that's
is
that's
deep.
a whole
Yeah, definitely
that's a
level.
whole
Yeah.
other a different lane, a deeper conversation. But unfortunately, I mean, and I know some people may think, really, you guys want to get compensated? It's like, well, you took something that wasn't yours. The world is benefiting. We're thankful for that, but you're profiting from it.
Yes.
And you're saying this is all mine. Well, it was never yours to begin with.
Exactly.
Right. So again, I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of Power of the Pen, for sharing your book with us. Want to put it here. You can get a copy of Henrietta Lacks, The Untold Story by Ron Lacks on Amazon.com. Yes, yes, hold it up. And you can go to the website, HenriettaLacksUntold.com. I'll make sure I correct that, HenriettaLacksUntold.com. And he will, if you want to schedule him for speaking engagements, just to interview, learn a little bit more, I encourage you to do so, because as you said, Ron, we have to start telling our own story.
Exactly.
For the better. Tryna get back in the
Well
mansion,
said.
but they're lying and they
Well,
wanna
thank
get
you so
away.
very much to those of
Henrietta,
you that
I
are
always
joining us for
remind
Power of
you.
the Pen. I hope you've
I
enjoyed
will
this
keep on
edition
fighting till the
with
day
Mr.
that I
Ron
got
Lacks,
you. Won't let
grandson
history
of
break
his
me
Nana,
down.
arguably
They know you
the
beings
amazing
of the crown, and I
and still
thank you.
living Henrietta Lacks.
Yeah.
Thank you again,
Just know
everyone.
that I
Until
thank
next
you.
time.
I write this letter to
Bye.
the broken heart. You gotta carry on, carry on, carry on. You get no pleasure with no pain, no, no. Military mind, what the hell you do me wrong? I write this letter to the broken heart. You gotta carry on, carry on, carry on. You get no pleasure with no pain, no, no. Yeah, yeah.
Bless you, Henrietta, for those miraculous healer cells. I will carry on your legacy of love and bring peace and harmony to the Lacks family.
Hey, Barbara.
Hey,
How is it going?
good, good. Wonderful information. Wow, that was powerful. That just shows you more and more of the giants in Black history that are the untold stories, and knowing how powerful what they put in this world.
Exactly. And when I was interviewing Ron Lacks, I thought about, and we've had Barry B. Mixon on our platform talking about the importance of our story. And the African American community, for the most part, we've had an oral history. But when we look at what's in our history books, um, primary, secondary education, so much is missing, or that which is there has been whitewashed. And to think that they changed the name associated with the cells to make it more acceptable
Mm.
for people to be willing to accept the medical advancements and treatments that came about from the use of her cells. I mean, that's a different conversation, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
one thing to say you didn't tell the story, but it's another thing to say, well, we kind of had to change the story because most of America would have ran left when you said, oh, by the way, this is from an African American woman. I don't think so, right?
Yeah. And that's happened so many times in our history where, they've changed the whole format because they knew that if they put it out there that, it was a Black African American doing it, they'd be like, oh, we can't sell this, or nobody's going to go for it. It's not going to get huge and it's not going to blow up like it did because they had to do that change.
Right. And I congratulate him on being willing to say, okay, we understand that there was a book that when it came out and there was a movie that we thank you for spotlighting, right? They were spotlighting his grandmother, Henrietta Lacks, and the whole science behind it and the advancements. But I applaud him for saying, but you guys kind of missed some key pieces. I want the world to know the other side of the story. I want you to know who she was, right? And we had a question during the episode, and someone asked, they said, Mr. Lacks, do you believe that your grandmother would have given consent to the use of her cells? And, we don't know. Maybe she would have, and she may have said no. I don't know. The laws at that time weren't designed to protect cellular usage of the human body, but now you have that, that code of ethics that's there. But as I mentioned, how many of us, because I can say I never asked, who's had any kind of biopsy, ever said, all I was concerned about, I'm going to be full transparency, cancer or no cancer, right? That's all I wanted to know. Is there anything I need to be concerned about? But beyond that, I never even thought of saying, now what are you going to do with this? How are you going to discard this sample? Are you even discarding it?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like you said, LaWanna, because just like maybe 2 years ago for me, I had a biopsy because they seen something in my breast and they wanted to double check. And, they give you that form. And like you said earlier in the interview, it's this long form. And in your mind, like you said, the thing you're thinking about is, I hope this is not cancerous or not. Okay, you're giving me a form to sign. You said, give me all this paperwork. You're saying, well, we're going to do this and da-da-da. We're going to, all that language that they say. And you like you said, you're in your mind. I feel like they know. I believe that they know. I'm just going to put it out there. That they know if, okay, you have a person, they're really focused on their health right now, and you're throwing all this paperwork in front of them and really not letting them digest what's going on. So you kind of miss sometimes that part of it where, okay, where is this going? To this day, I don't know where they went, when they did the biopsy.
And someone during the show said, mentioned, well, the medical system, and I'll just use U.S. medical, has the quote unquote navigators, those that are the social workers, those that are there to help guide the families. Well, how many do you actually think are in a hospital? When you look at the ratio of these navigators to patients. Mm-hmm. And that's why it is so important, especially, everyone, this isn't excluding any group of people, but especially within your marginalized communities where we may not have representation in the medical field. So now we have our own insecurities and phobias associated with it, because we want to see people who look like us, who's explaining things to us. So we create this trust with the medical field. And I think, for example, we know the HeLa cells were very instrumental in guiding us through this pandemic and the testing of the vaccines. But how many African Americans were fearful of getting the vaccine, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because we're scarred by history. We may not have known someone in Tuskegee or that was their bodies were ravaged for gynecological research, but we know the stories. And we're like, I don't know. Are you're going to test it on us first? We don't want to be the guinea pigs anymore. Right?
Yeah, I know a lot of people were nervous about that. I know, especially the older people in our generation too. They were like, I don't know about that. Maybe we really rethink this whole thing, because remember what happened, and they always go back to, like you said. So it is something to think about, as a whole, especially as a minority, of how we went through certain things and how they taken and done things, like you said, experiment and everything.
Right. Yeah. I just encourage everyone, definitely explore and understand a little bit more about Henrietta Lacks, the HeLa cells. Again, we just scratched the surface on some of the medical advancements, but OMG, when you look at everything that has happened because of having access to cells that do not die. Think about that. They literally are immortal. These cells were replicating themselves, doubling every 24 to 48 hours. And prior to the conversation, I believe Ron said that the cells, there's so many right now in the world of her cells that you can wrap around, I think he said, like the state of New York 4 or 5 times. There's that much. They're just doing their thing. And it's truly a gift to us when you're thinking about from polio and all of these other diseases that could have wiped out segments of the population. But we were able to test the efficacy, using her cells, or like I said, with Madison and Mason. And it just, when I learned that IVF, in vitro fertilization, came about because of that, I cried. I literally, I bawled my eyes out. I thought, my niece and nephew would not be here. Would not be here. And you're like, whoa, it's again the right timing and God's divine guidance, and again, we know wrong was done. We get that. But then on the other side, look at the blessing. Look at the gift that the world has because of this woman who is just now really getting elevated and spotlighted and celebrated. And the family is fighting hard for this. And rightfully so. Rightfully so.
It's just a shame that they have to fight so hard. That I always think about that just irks me, where it shouldn't even have to be that. It's just like, okay, this woman is saving lives, showing things, like you said, your niece and nephew and other people that had to go through, parents had to go through that to get their children. So many. It was another opportunity for them to have children. Think about that. It's a life that she was basically through herself to give life for others. And to fight for that recognition, just to say, hey, this was my, grandma, this was my mother that did this. Why? It's just crazy.
Yeah, like I mentioned, that I had heard about the HeLa cells because I was, I didn't finish or go into med school, but I was pre-med. So I had heard of the HeLa cells, but I never knew the origin of them. It was just these, by the way, we discovered these cells, like they just dropped down from heaven.
Yeah.
But I didn't think to ask. I was like, okay. So fast forward, from being in college in the late 80s to literally 2 years ago, I found out the origin of the cells. Just had no clue.
Yeah.
So
this again tells us that we really have to really look at this history. I know it's just the 1 month out the year, but I just really urge people, and myself, I'm talking to myself too, to really urge to go out and really research the what was built through our minority. There's so much. This is just right here is huge. And there's so many just like that where a lot of us don't know because we were taught, it wasn't brought to us when we were younger. We never really kind of moved on. I know that me and a lot of people, I told them about this today, what you were, interviewing him, and they were like, really? I didn't even know. So I'm hearing that a lot. And I said, we need to make sure that we're researching, look at this information, because what did they say a long time ago? Like, if you want to hide, and this is a sad quote that you just say, if you want to hide something from a Black person, put it in a book. And I hate that saying. I just hate it. And I said, let's not have ourselves hidden in books. Let us reflect out so people can know who we are and what we've done.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that saying too, but unfortunately, this isn't in the books, right? So it's like either you hide it in a book, or you don't even put it out there, or it's whitewashed, or someone else is taking credit for it, right? That's done a lot.
Yes.
And so it is incumbent upon us, for those of us who are truth seekers and who find the truth, to get up and say, okay, you may have been taught this, but we're going to give you the other side. And I know one of the things you and I've talked about, and it's so hilarious, if individuals, whoever's watching this, really ask yourself a question: how much Black history from elementary school, we'll just take you through high school, forget college, from elementary school to when you graduated from college, how much Black history did you learn about? Because remember, Black history is American history. Well, I can probably guess exactly what you learned. You learn that there were slaves. You learn that the first person who died on American soil for the Revolution was a Black man by the name of Crispus Attucks. And you fast forward a little bit and you may have learned about Phyllis Wheatley and Paul Laurence Dunbar, who were poets. Go a little bit further, and now we're talking about the fight for freedom, right? Freeing the slaves. And you may have heard the name Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. Then silence. And we go 1910, 20, 30, 40, 50. Whoa, MLK! Rosa Parks. That's the extent of Black history in our books when you really think about it. But all of these other rich, brilliant names, did you hear about them? Did you learn about them? When we're talking about our political system, do you know the first Black woman who ran for the Democratic ticket? Shirley Chisholm. Or, so again, there's just so much. Did you know the first surgeon, cardiologist, who made advancements in heart transplants was African American? What about our blood banks? Did you know the largest ones were set up by an African American because he understood hematology? And because of all that he did, Germany brought him over to help them. I mean, and that's just scientifically. And then we know all about the hidden figures. And so there's just so much. That's why we say Black history is American history. And when I went to Seattle, and I went to Chinatown and went into one of their actually one of the largest Chinese American museums in the nation, and I was shocked at the history. Again, Chinese history, Japanese history, Asian history, it's all American history too. How much I didn't know. And I thought, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So why is it that it's so slighted? Why is it so skewed? That's why power dependent, that we use the word power dependent, it's so critical. If you have a message, if you have a story, let this be your voice. Let it be an instrument to get to the masses. This platform is designed to help create awareness, create that conversation, help change the narrative, challenge the status quo. We can't allow our voices to be silent anymore. We have to tell the truth, our story's truth. I mean, we are all part of living history. Yes. Living history. One of the things, and I just want to share, and I'll do a post tomorrow for the last day of Black History Month, but I am so proud of my ancestry and the shoulders that I stand on. And the one who's still living is my father, who is a Buffalo Soldier. So it's like you hear it, you hear the song, but I'm like, I grew up, I was raised by a Buffalo Soldier. And to hear his stories of coming into the Army when it still was a segregated Army. And just the life that he lived. He's 91 and his grandchildren are only 16 years old. So you can imagine how interesting the conversations are at our dinner table, because the reference, they're so different, yet so similar. Because while he was dealing with hearing and reading about lynchings, Madison and Mason, age 16, are dealing with modern day lynching, which is the police brutality, the senseless murders, corporate. Let's talk about, we can go, that's a whole nother conversation. Corporate lynching and corporate enslavement. Yeah. That's a whole different conversation. So there's just a lot. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Barbara, before we sign off. Is there anything else that you want to say regarding Black history and what we have upcoming with what we're doing for authors?
Well, I just want to say regarding the Black history is just going back what LaWanna was saying, I was saying, so important to understand the stories that are out there about us, because not just for us to know, but for our future to know. They need to know that it's not just certain avenues that they can go down the path. They need to know that within politics, within medical, within, every area, there were big shoes out there that they were doing things in those areas of industries, and they can do it too. And I think that's what's really been on my heart lately, is that, we need to make sure that we show them they're not hidden. Things are not like the hidden figures. It's not hidden to them. It's out there, and they know that they can do the same thing if they want to follow in those footsteps and move in those industries. So I just want to leave it at that it's very important to have these stories come out more, because our youth needs to know this.
Yeah, and I just want to encourage everyone, if you've enjoyed this show, tune into Power of the Pen each Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. It'll be live on Facebook, but our primary home is, it's streaming here on Facebook, is on E360 TV. And there you can see a lot of the archive shows, but we're so excited to be part of our new home again, E360 TV, where we are showcasing authors, especially women authors who have a voice, have a unique message, and they want to get it out. So if you are an author, uh, and you have this independent voice that you want to platform and showcase, reach out to me or Barbara Beckley. We would love to send you an application and talk to you about how you can be a part of Power of the Pen. And the one thing with E360 TV, it's a platform that has over 2 million internationally, an audience of over 2 million internationally. So it really helps you to broaden your reach and expand your voice and your impact around the world. So with that, I want to say thank you so very much for joining Barbara Beckley and I for another edition of Power of the Pen. And next month, we're real excited because it is Women's History Month. Hashtag Stop the Violence. So you're going to hear, it's not, I keep saying stop the violence, but it's stop the bias. And violence is one of those biases, yes. Right? So we're going to have just different individuals who are going to come and share what they're doing and how they're positioning their message to help change that narrative and stop the bias. So until next time, be safe, and just remember that when your vision and your voice intersect with opportunity and you pick up the power of the pen, you can make a difference. Until next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I am trying to get this up.